already been, and whatever will be may have been before. We attempt to put on display our perception of time in the universe. As gravity acts upon mass and space, that force is transferred through a mesmerizing lever system, regulated by a pendulum, and displayed on a clock face. This Lego pendulum clock is 100% Lego, 100% mechanical, and very practical. Accurate up to a couple seconds per week, this clock can function as many other high-end mechanical clocks. There are 0 electronics or batteries. The clock gets its energy from a Lego weight which drops from gravity and can run for 24 hours on a single run. At the heart of the clock is its escapement. The well-renowned Lego clockmaker, David Ziemkiewicz, made a low-amplitude grasshopper escapement which was chosen for this clock. Inspired by the infamous horologist John Harrison's original grasshopper escapement, it runs without lubrication in a movement that is both mesmerizing and geometrically intricate. The escapement is fitted with a long and rigid 2-second pendulum, which allows for greater accuracy and stability. Specially fitted into this piece is Lego clockmaker David and Aldrich's elegant H-loop weight system, carefully pieced together by hundreds of Lego chain links. The delicate system sits in the middle of the clock and loops around the main weight and counterweight. Simply pulling on the leftmost chain will rewind the clock. This system ensures the weight's energy to the escapement is theoretically constant. The clock housing and structure is again from Aldrich's designs. Using simple black Technic frames, the clock can fit an array of axles and gears, while also remaining structurally sound and simple. The back of the inner workings are attached to the wall via a simple screw and anchor, further held in place by Lego rubber track pieces sitting against the wall. The piece is a marriage of art and mechanical wonder. Although simple, the clock will run without traditional maintenance, due to extraordinary innovations from historical horologists and Lego clockmakers alike. But before we dive in, let's take a very brief look at the history of Lego clocks and how I got here. If we go way back in time, to when the dinosaurs first roamed the planet. No, just kidding. The 2000s wasn't that long ago. Some of the earlier Lego clock content was around the 2010s from many of the original Lego clock YouTubers. Some of these were Amy Varsano, Ven de Ball, Horophile, and the infamous Kevronista. These people often made videos of escapement mechanisms, and many of them use older Lego parts. The people I will be mentioning in this video are just ones that I've seen make substantial stuff. There could be very well more great YouTubers who cover this topic. Most of the Lego clock community is active on just YouTube, aside from the few posts on forums like Aerobricks and Discord. There are still many great Lego clocks made that have been featured at conventions or from people who otherwise don't make clock videos. I will be linking to every channel mentioned in this video in the description, so check them out. Starting off, Kevronista in particular made all kinds of videos on various Lego clock components, like the chiming mechanisms, a huge grasshopper escapement, and beautiful remontoirs. Of particular note though, he made instruction videos on how to make simple skeleton clocks. I've always been interested in clocks, but personally he was the guy who got me into Lego clocks. Putting in the effort to make instructions for these timepieces was a great deal, because the community was, and really still is, pretty tiny on the internet. His skeleton clocks were made mostly of system bricks and Lego Technic system beams, which is good because using Lego system Technic beams instead of just the lift arms usually result in more sturdy structure and therefore less friction. The first skeleton clock he made just hung on the wall with screws, just like this clock does. But his next skeleton clocks relied on you having some kind of non-Lego piece that you had to make yourself, like a wooden bracket which sat on the wall. Out of all the other previous LEGO clocks I've attempted before this one, his most recent skeleton clock was the only one that worked reliably once I got it properly tuned. The OG Kevronista has not made videos in a while, but is still active in the YouTube comments. A little after that time, we had some more YouTubers start to make more prominent videos, such as David Ziemkiewicz, whose book is featured in this video, Dylan Charlotte, and Darrel Aldrich, whose overall clock structure is used in my clock. Now, the first LEGO clock I ever attempted was actually from Nico71's Technic Creations on YouTube. He often makes like various Technic mechanisms and alternate builds. It was a Galileo clock that had to sit on the side of a table. It was made mostly out of Technic beams. I remember being extremely determined to understand the clock and get it working, staying up until 5 a.m. multiple nights. But I only ever got it to run about 12 hours, and it was way too unforgiving and finicky, so I just moved on. The next wall clock I attempted was from Dylan Charlotte, which was a step up in practicality. The clock was better looking and easy to rewind. You just had to pull on a chain. Once again, though, I spent countless hours on this clock. Its main faults were that you had to make a back wooden bracing, which hung on the wall, but it was a very specific kind of design. And if the angles weren't designed right from the wood and the clock didn't sit on the wall exactly right, the entire structure would lock up and there would be way too much friction. Once again, I got it to work just for a little bit, but then it was never reliable enough. Today, the community has seen some people who continually further the craft, such as the previously mentioned David Ziemkiewicz and Darrel Aldrich. Some newer people such as Kay Abe and Boris F. have pushed the limits, though. Abe has an ongoing project for the most accurate LEGO clock, and F has made a beautiful grandfather clock, equipped with stuff like a chiming mechanism and previous LEGO clock innovations over the years. Next comes Darrel Aldrich, who mainly makes instructions on beautiful wall clocks, and then he made a full-on grandfather clock that he continues to work on. He has many documents stored online from his YouTube channel, with most of the instructions and digital files, which are accessible to anyone. Truly a great feat. He also made up the elegant H-loop weight system, which will be discussed later in this video, and that's used in this clock. But the thing is, his clocks finally nailed the aspect that most of the LEGO clock community was missing, in my opinion: practicality. His clocks simply required only one screw in the wall and were designed around sturdy Technic frames. These frames have many holes and allow for all kinds of axles and gears. Sandwich multiple frames together and you have a clock box mechanism like real clocks do. His centered weight system was also extremely practical. No more fiddling with string or weights hanging awkwardly on the side of the structure. Long story short, I finally put together a refined version of his wall clock with an automatic weight winder after so many years. But due to the extreme sensitivity of the grasshopper escapement he was using called Stouffer, I'll discuss that later in this video, I had to make some changes. If I was lucky enough to get the escapement working after hours of trial and error, any little movement could knock the adjustments off and it would stop working. Now, Ziemkiewicz is by far the most influential LEGO clock content creator today. He has made almost any video you can think of about LEGO clocks. He makes videos on impressive clocks that he builds himself, instructions for smaller ones, and he also has a treasure trove of videos on the physics behind LEGO clocks, along with a book that we'll discuss in this video. Tons of content about mathematics and physics and recording scientific data for these kinds of clocks. He currently holds the public record for the most accurate LEGO mechanical clock. He also has been an immense help in getting me to understand this clock. After months, and yes, I mean months, of tinkering and trial and error with all kinds of different designs by Ziemkiewicz, and his help answering my crazy questions, I finally settled on an escapement that's not too hard to set up, very efficient, and decently accurate. I also modified the clock to house the escapement and be manual, along with other various things that will be discussed later. Now, with the brief history out of the way, we can finally dive into the nitty-gritty of this timepiece. Alright, now here is the actual clock. Now this is really just a modification of Aldrich and his wall clock designs. It's just a simple clock box, just like a real clock, 2 main frames, and then all the axles sandwiched in between this. And we'll discuss, why I find this so good and practical later. But most of the behind the scenes stuff from this clock was slowly gained from this book right here. Now, David Ziemkiewicz, which we've talked about in the previous section, is like the physics guy behind Lego clocks. He makes tons of videos on all the physics and all the mathematics behind them, and he just published this book last year, I believe. You can get it online or you can get it on Amazon, but I got the physical version, and this book goes over all kinds of stuff. It has almost any kind of information you would want about Lego clocks and all the physics and all the different mechanisms that go into them. This video is not going to go into the mathematics of this clock. I didn't formally, publish or retrieve a bunch of information about the pendulum and the accuracy. None of that. I didn't check every single axle to make sure it was straight, or order all new parts to make sure everything could be, as perfect as possible. I didn't dust every single thing off or clean everything. Now everything's reasonably clean, but I didn't this isn't very, very scientific is what I'm trying to get at. I just want to go over all that went into this, and that's what the point of this video is. So I feel like a good place to start with this book is the first section about gear ratios. Now, gear ratios are one of the biggest things to understand when dealing with clocks. So at their core, gears are really just lever systems. And the gear ratio is how the torque and speed are converted through these lever systems. And you always start with whatever axle is being driven. So for example, this is 24 teeth, this is 8 teeth. If this one's being driven, this gear will spin 3 times faster than this one, and it will have 3 times less torque when bigger gears turn smaller gears. If we do the opposite and this gear turns this gear, it's going to be 3 times slower, but it will have 3 times more torque. So it'll be able to drive things a lot easier. This book references gear ratios really well. It even has a little table you can reference things on. And as for the rest of the book, it dives pretty deep into the physics and mathematics behind pendulums and how they work and all that stuff. Tons and tons of great stuff, really. If you're interested in this kind of stuff and really want to dive deep down the rabbit hole. So many different interesting things. He even gives instructions for different mechanisms. And then he gets into escapement near the middle of the book. And we'll be talking about the grasshopper escapement in this video because that's what's used in this clock. And he has some pictures of clocks that he's made. I'm personally a big fan of this modern one over there. And even has instructions at the very end of the book for making your own clock. So now that we've gone over an overview of the book, I'm going to dive into the clock more and talk about all its specific components. So first of all, the main design of this clock, the clock itself. This was mostly, as I've said, Aldrich and his design. I just modified it. So what it is, it's 2 large black Technic frames, and then you have the gears and the axles sandwiched in between them. The sides are very well reinforced by all these panels on the bottom and on the top, so things can't move too much. You have the escapement in the front, the hands out here. It hangs on the wall with a simple screw and anchor. You have these rubber pieces to keep it solid. Now this does a lot of different things. Adjusting the beat, if you didn't want to mess with the escapement, is really easy. You just move the clock very slightly on the wall and that will adjust the beat. It's very easy to modify in some ways. We'll go over about that a little bit later because you have all these different holes for all the axle placements. And it's easy to fit a box around. It's not too big, you just need a single screw in the wall and all kinds of little things like that just makes this very practical. It's easier to reinforce all these frames because you can connect stuff on the side. Now, there are some things about this design that I don't really like. It's Lego, so you can modify whatever you want, but the weight system is hung by 2 chains on these 2 dark gray 24 teeth gears. And the pendulum hangs right here. So that means you are extremely limited in the design of the weight you have, or else it will touch the pendulum as it's swinging. And if you push the pendulum farther out, it's just going to mess with the balance of things a little bit. So that's kind of limiting in that way. But overall, I think this is a great design. Now, before I go more into the details about this specific clock, I want to dive into the heart of this clock, which is the grasshopper escapement. Now, the grasshopper was designed by one of famous horologists. His name is John Harrison. And the grasshopper pretty much ensures that there's like very little to no friction, so you don't need lubrication. It's very accurate. One of the most accurate mechanical clocks in the world uses a grasshopper escapement. And David has designed so many of these. In this book, he goes over the physics of them, how they work, step by steps on all the actions of the escapement and the physics. And for this clock, I specifically chose the low amplitude grasshopper because it doesn't use a lot of energy, and I can have a clock run for a little bit longer as it runs for 24 hours. He goes over all the details about this and breaks it down in this section. And later in the book, he goes over 2-wheel grasshoppers, which are better, more stable, more accurate, but they're way less energy efficient. They're energy hogs. So the clock wouldn't be able to run as long if I used those. Now, this is the escapement right here without the pendulum. I made a little modification, which I'll talk about soon, but this is very small, very simple. It goes against the 40-tooth gear, which is common to use for Lego escapements. It rests on a little axle hole below the escapement with this bar piece. It's supposed to have a very good Q factor, which just means how long the pendulum can swing without stopping, so like the friction and all the energy loss and everything. So it just goes like this. And those 2 blue pieces are the pallets, left pallet and the right pallet. Too much about the physics of this. I do know that it has a very low signal to noise ratio, so it can be disturbed pretty easily, but it's been running fine for me for multiple months. Now, something I really like about this is there's a linear actuator here that lets you adjust the beat of the clock. So like the evenness between the left and right ticks. And it's very easy. You just move this knob down here very slightly and it will change the beat. But the thing is, these Lego parts have slack in them, so it will move like a couple millimeters up and down. And that can cause the beat to be massively changed as it's ticking, if it's not, like if there's slack in there. So I took these Lego rubber bands, again, this clock is 100% Lego, and attached it so it's always pulling on the lowermost position, so I don't have to worry about that, and it's very easy to adjust the beat. Alright, I put the escapement on as it would be normally, and as you can see, there's a little bit of wiggle room for it to move back and forth like this, which is good, but as it's ticking, sometimes it will walk all the way towards the back or front, which I talked to Ziemkiewicz and he said that that's not a big problem. I did implement a little bit of like a suspension design that David goes over in his book, which tries to minimize that walking, and it does help a little bit, just not all the way. One thing you can see, I also have a little stopper here. With grasshoppers, sometimes the escapement will break free and start spinning like crazy, so this is just to stop that very easily if that happens. Alrighty, So I took the frames off, and now we can get into the meat and potatoes of the clock. So this is the entire clock with the back frame off. This is the going train. That's the only complication this clock has. The change system, which we'll go over in a little bit, designed by Aldrich as well, drives this 24-tooth gear, which goes from here all the way to the escapement axle and drives the escapement. It is a 1 to 35 ratio from this gear to the escapement gear. Now the change system that is used in this clock acts as a pulley, so it's actually multiplied by 2. It's more like a 1 to 75 ratio. And then it continues to go up along the gear train into here, which goes to the minute hand, which goes over here to the worm gear and drives the hour hand, which is connected to this differential casing that allows the minute hand to go straight through. Design is designed by Ziemkiewicz, where you have these pneumatic hose piece connecting to this, and this acts as the hour hand. The minute hand just attaches right there. Now also in here is this other part. This is where the other part of the change system is on. This is the ratchet, so when you pull on the chain from this direction, it will rewind it or pull the weight up, and the ratchet is just this piece that rests on that gear right there. That was designed by Aldrich in his original wall clocks. Something from this clock which before I go into that, I'm sure it's very obvious, but since this is 24 teeth and the pendulum is 2 seconds, it takes 80 seconds for this to make one rotation. So something that I did in this design myself was, with the amount of space I wanted from the clock to the wall, I was limited in the gear placements because of these panels and all the other things I wanted to do and the space I needed down here. So I was very limited in the clutch I could have. I needed the clutch to be 1 stud thick. So I had to design my own clutch for this clock. This lets you drive the minute and hour hand without, stopping the clock or sending too much power to the escapement. Now this is the clutch. It's simply made by this 2x2 Lego piece with the axle hole, and then this one, smooth one, you just put them together, and you take this Technic axle with a little stud in the end, push it in there, and this one also has a stud that goes in. It's a little bit hard, so it's not the smoothest movement of the hands, but it works. And also, because these two pieces have a tendency to come apart, it really will only work in a situation like this where it's constantly being sandwiched between the frames. But it works, and it hasn't failed me yet. Something else I wanted to talk about with this clock is I wanted to minimize the amount of backlash that the hands have. In a lot of Lego clocks, because these parts aren't designed, for clocks, they have a lot of backlash in the gears, which means the minute and hour hand might be slightly off, like by minutes even, or seconds if you turn them. So in this clock, I really wanted to minimize that as much as possible. And in David's book, he talks about this near the front section right here. So he goes into the backlash, and he talks about how using bigger gears usually results in less backlash if you mesh a lot of big gears together rather than just small ones. So in here, I tried my best to only have big gear meshes. You can see I'm using the 40 tooth, the 8 tooth, the 32, I think, 12. So instead of meshing a bunch of small or medium-sized gears, I have more big gears. The only thing I wasn't able to do is to get rid of these two 24-tooth meshes over here because I needed the hands to spin the right direction, and the escapement can only spin one direction, but I feel like I did pretty good with the hand backlash. The minute hand probably is like 10 seconds, has like 10 or 15 seconds of backlash, which is not too bad if I do say so myself. Alright, before I go on to the next section, I wanted to talk about this little idea that I've seen from someone on the Lego Aerobricks forum. It's an axle checker. It checks how straight axles are. In Lego clocks, this really matters because axles that are slightly bent will affect the clock and the friction and the rotation and all that stuff. I don't know how foolproof this is, but this is a test. So you take an axle. This is 8 1x2 bricks with the 2 technicals, and then you can see right through it. You take an axle, you put it through, and if it falls all the way through, it's good. If it doesn't, it's not good. Now, you can try this multiple times on multiple sides. Like I said, this probably isn't very scientific, but it's a good idea for Lego clocks. I didn't do it for this particular clock. I just think if this is done more, the accuracy might be able to be improved with Lego clocks, because even in new Lego sets that I've gotten, the axles can be bent and cause problems. So as you can see in here, I also tried to minimize the amount of bending by, only having this one like 5 long, and a lot of the axles are also propped up, even though they don't need to be, by like a stud, just so it doesn't bend too much. Now it does bend, but not as much as it would otherwise. So I wanted to show the similarities between this Lego design and a more real kind of clock design. This is just an alarm clock. It's not like anything fancy, the inside of a old alarm clock, but you can see in reality it's very similar. You have the 2 frames and the axles and gears sandwiched in between them, and then you have the hands coming out, and you can put whatever you want around it. So I really like that about this design. It's very practical and similar to real clocks, rather than just a random hodgepodge of structure that might bend and stuff. So now I want to look at the pendulum bob design. This was, again, designed by Aldrich, and just minimal modifications from me. It uses 2 Lego boat weight bricks, these 2 gigantic black bricks that are also used in the weight of the clock, and they just hang on the side right here, so it doesn't take up a lot of space. And I just added this wheel on my own. But the main point of this is that you can adjust the length of the pendulum by just turning this knob, which moves this large linear actuator. It does have a little bit of slack, but you can make very precise adjustments with this. And I even have this little nut at the bottom that can also be moved up and down. Now the rod design is very simple. It's Lego Technic beams, which are sandwiched in between these plates, which makes for a very rigid structure. This was something that David also talked about in his book, I believe. And because if you don't do that, the vibrations are going to lose energy. But being that this is, it still vibrates a little bit, but it has a lot of rigidity to it. Forgot to say this is around 250 grams, which is almost where David suggested. He suggested like around 300 for this, but I believe this is close. So now I wanted to talk about something pretty cool in this clock, which is the weight system. Now in David's book, he goes over different weight systems you can use. And a lot of clocks are used with string around a spool, but this clock just uses chains. Now usually with weight-driven systems, the amount of power going to the train is changed as the weight drops, because there's more chain on top of the weight as the weight is falling down. But with this H-loop design by Aldrich, which is used in this clock, David talks about how the power isn't, or at least theoretically, isn't really changed as it goes down. So the accuracy is not affected as a clock's weight is going down. At least that's what I understand, which is a very cool, innovative thing, in my opinion, for a Lego clock. The weight system is, you've seen the 2 gears at the top of the box that they're connected to, right here, and then at the bottom they're held by the counterweight. This is just 2 more weight bricks again, but this makes the chains taut. The rest is the chain system, which holds the main weight. In this clock, the weight is around 850 grams. I don't know the exact weight anymore, and the chains will start snapping and breaking, which is a huge problem. Chains are just looped around these gears like so. It's a very simple and elegant system, because you just pull on the left chain to pull the weight up. Now, something I wanted to talk about using Lego chains. That was 850 grams, but if I had 4 more weight breaks, so 200 more grams on there, the chains would often snap on me as I was rewinding the weight, and the entire chain system would just go kabuka, which, is not very good. So these chains can only hold a certain amount. They're very easy to snap and break off, and some parts have different variances than others. It's very finicky. So I wouldn't recommend going more than 850, which is what I have now, which kind of limits what you can do, unfortunately, with this system. With these chains, because you can't have more power if you wanted to. You'd have to use like a custom Lego chain system, which I believe someone has already done this on YouTube. He also goes over notable Lego clock channels on YouTube in his book, and Beryl Levy has designed a system of a brick-built Lego chain, which isn't going to snap like the other one. So if you use that, you could increase the weight dramatically. I just wanted to show all the chains in this clock. This lasts for about 24 hours. This is all the chain you need. This is where most of the building goes into. It's just all these chains. It's crazy. And they're a pain to set up if you mess up, or it's such a stressful thing, but it's worth it in the end for the great system. Lastly, I want to talk about the face design for this clock. This is my own design. I got inspired by some Google images, pretty much. Nothing fancy, but I think it's very simple and kind of modern looking, and it lets you see part of the pendulum rod swinging through the middle. The attachment points for this are extremely simple. These 2 pieces just attach right onto the front of the clock box right here, and the differential just goes right through the middle. Now, I did get inspired by something else as well. I was trying to figure out what parts I had on hand, because this face only uses parts I had in my collection. I didn't buy anything for the face. So I found this alien ship set I had, and I saw that it was very round. So I just took these big gray parts from the alien set and made a circle with it, which I think is really nice. And I also love these banana rack gears, because they let you put 12, 3, 6, and the 2 in between. Not all 60, but, enough. Now, one thing to note about clocks, and especially Lego clocks, that's not talked about that much, is that every single thing matters. Every piece, every gear, every design element has to be absolutely perfect. If even 1 millimeter of the pendulum is too long or too short, for example, the clock could be off in accuracy for over a minute. If even one axle is misaligned or not braced properly, the entire thing might not work. If one chain link is not connected properly, the entire weight system could collapse. It's really hard to believe how much of my time has been spent on this Lego, whose function is just to tell time, when we literally have any other electronic device which can do this better. But that's not the point, is it? To attempt this in the form of little plastic Lego bricks is truly a unique feat, constrained but also limitless by their own system. The awe of Lego will always be fascinating. I have this little tire just for extra weight and aesthetic reasons. Ow!